Thank you all, and welcome to DRI International's latest webinar presentation. I'm Lyndon Bird, DRI's Chief Knowledge Officer and Chair of the Future Vision Committee. I will be the moderator for today's event. Today we'll be looking at the risk management and preparation involved in a major public-facing event through the lens of two with first-hand experience coordinating one of the most massive events in recent years, the 2012 London Olympics. Joining us today to share their stories and takeaways for all resilience professionals to enjoy are Steve Yates, CBCP, FBCI, who is also Chair of the Resilience Association and an independent risk consultant. And with Steve will be Andy Tompkinson, FBCI, Business Continuity Consultant and co-author of the book, Business Continuity for Dummies. If you have questions for the speakers, you can ask them in the box on your screens, and Steve and Andy will answer them in a future post in DRI's Drive e-newsletter. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start off with Steve.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I've been asked by the DRI to speak on how do you manage risks at a major event. My talk will cover a series of resiliency good practice and learning legacy points from the time working as the head of business continuity and crisis management for the Olympic Delivery Authority, gained from the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. It will include advice that I was personally involved in producing, such as preparing your business for the Games, still applicable for any major event, for which the strapline was business as unusual. In the short time that we have, I'll be covering a period of nearly 5 Olympic years. My plan is therefore to take you on a journey where I will take you through putting forward a question for everyone in this webinar to consider, explaining a difficult time that changed the risk landscape for London, outlining the risk appetite and strategy that delivered London 2012, explain the risk management methodology used for the London Olympics, understanding what business as usual really means for any major event, remind you of those difficult questions that must be answered, providing a checklist of how to prepare for your business for major events, and outlining good practice options that should be a consideration. I will be covering a range of areas relating to London 2012, which are based upon my personal knowledge and experiences gained over some 5 years, before and during Games time, and as such should not be attributed to any other party or organisation. With all this in mind, before starting, it might be best if I explain what my role and responsibilities were before and during the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympic Games. Between 2008 and the end of 2012, I was employed by the Olympic Delivery Authority, an organisation that was identified as United Kingdom non-departmental government body. This therefore meant that technically I was employed by the United Kingdom government with a mission to lead their risk and continuity programme, delivering a core programme as a Category 1 responder throughout the following Olympic delivery phases: the planning applications piece, the demolish, dig and design, big build that went up to 27th July 2011. Then we had test events and the Olympic and Paralympic Games. At the height of the big build, I was fortunate enough to be working alongside some great people, 188 in total, all of whom were subject matter experts in their particular areas, and certainly some of the best individuals that I've ever worked alongside. We were supported by our main delivery partner, and between us managed in a region of 50,000 contractors and suppliers as part of a 7-tier supply chain. My job initially reported in security, not risk, during the pre-Games period, being responsible for a programme comprising of operational risk, business continuity management involving policy and strategy, risk and impact assessments, supply chain management, continuity planning and incident response, information technology disaster recovery, emergency management alongside fire, police, ambulance authorities, as well as other supporting elements. Testing and exercising of capabilities alongside loads of the emergency services, including all support elements through to venue testing, crisis management at tactical and strategic levels. In addition, the Olympic Delivery Authority and London Organising Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games both shared the same Olympic logo, with strategic aims that were closely linked, meaning that we both had responsible for the Olympic brand, image and reputation for not only the London 2012 Olympic Games, but also the United Kingdom and in part the International Olympic Committee. Both these organisations were key stakeholders for the Olympics, and as such, my responsibilities also included a shared mission and vision, requiring liaison with common stakeholders and delivery of preparing your business for the Games, an area I intend to focus on shortly. What you should also know is that the role of the Olympic Delivery Authority is originally to build and fit out the stage for the Olympics, whilst the London Organising Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games was to create a performance suitable for the greatest show on earth. This approach became more joined up when the Olympic Delivery Authority was tasked to support LOCOG during the Games time. With what this meant was that our original mission had now been extended, and we had moved into a full Games time operational role, requiring us to manage all Games time venues, national, regional, local and venue transport. Key elements required by the United Kingdom Government Olympics Act to Parliament, as well as deliverables in the host city contract for the London 2012 Olympics, as well as command, control and communication for venues, transport and deliverables. So a question for everyone. To deliver any Olympic event, all that is needed to ensure that the stage is built securely and that the performance delivers the greatest show on earth to the world, with a start date that cannot change. Easy. So now the question for everyone attending this webinar: how would you establish a proportionate response to significant disruptions and or physically damaging events, whilst at the same time manage business as unusual before and during a major event? If any of you have a simple answer to this, I would certainly want to discuss this further, as I believe that the biggest challenge for anyone is to coordinate and manage the scale of moving parts throughout all event phases. What I mean by this is that you have to consider every part of the public sector, it's government, and a large proportion of the private sector business, as well as the population who is likely for major events. They will be expected to contribute money, tax for the stage and performance. The reason I mention this is at the start of my Olympic journey, apart from the International Olympic Committee guidelines, there were limited source of information how best to deliver a major event, the risk and continuity program, and at the same time get to the finale, the end of the performance, with limited damage, basically things going wrong. My research there identified that mega events, as this was considered, and any major event would be, are seen as being high profile, of worldwide interest, inclusive of sports and non-sports, sustainable and measurable, and delivering an economic outcome. The Olympics were seen to fit exactly into this description, as does a variety of other types of major events. So from my point of view, I found the start point. So the next step was to identify where the challenges were likely to come from. The first Olympic challenge for me and for the United Kingdom happened the day after the 6th of July 2005, when London won the final round by a margin of 4 votes over Paris and secured the right to host the 2012 Olympics. The following day, on the 7th of July 2005, now known as 7/7, 3 explosive bombs were detonated on board London Underground trains, all within 50 seconds of each other. Almost 1 hour after the attacks on London Underground, a fourth bomb was detonated on the top of a London double-decker bus. Initial media reports suggested a power surge on the underground power grid that caused explosions in power circuits. However, we were soon to learn that 56 people, including the 4 suicide bombers, have been killed by these attacks. There are also 700 injured, of whom about 100 were hospitalized for at least one night, some with life-changing injuries. This attack delivered a devastating warning to the United Kingdom government, an immediate wake-up call as to the level of preparedness not only London, but also the rest of the country would need for the Olympics. It also changed the approach to the level of risk appetite associated with delivery of the Olympic Games for London, as well as those other Olympic venues throughout the United Kingdom and also for the Olympic family. The impact on planned assumptions for London 2012 following 7/7 significantly changed from the original approach. It was decided to extend the framework of an existing safety and security program that had been developed following the 9/11 attacks. And to put in perspective, for the United Kingdom, there are 5 levels of threat. Low, an attack is unlikely. Moderate, an attack is possible but not likely. Substantial, an attack is strongly possible. Severe, an attack is highly likely. And critical, an attack is expected immediately. These levels are set by the Joint Terrorism and Analysis Centre and the Security Service, MI5, for which threat levels don't have an expiry date. However, they can change at any time as different information becomes available to security agencies. With this in mind, the planned assumptions of London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic safety and security strategy were therefore based upon an assumed terrorist threat level of severe. An attack is highly likely, for which directed that the necessary resources be made available to counter such threats. From my point of view, this strategy also established our risk appetite for the London 2012 Olympics. And having taken into account the overriding threats and some of the wider issues that could impact on working and living within the capital city, the United Kingdom was now planning for the worst. With this in mind, I now want to move on to how risk plays a significant part in identifying the wider issues that support a level of readiness for London 2012. In support of the context and associated risk appetite for the Olympics, the core supporting elements that were adopted by the United Kingdom government, so a range of risk deliverables are shown on this slide. These risk deliverables provide the necessary information to not only scope potential risks, but assist in identifying contingency arrangements that are proportionate and provided a measured response. The last 3 areas shown on this slide are of particular mention. Games time risk assessment looked at realistic scenarios that could cause significant disruption and or physically damaging events could impact on the games. High impact, low probability looked at the worst case scenario setting, which became key in setting the operational games time testing and exercising strategy. And secured by design covered the physical components for each new and existing venue, each one being rigorously tested, some requiring explosives through to 3D photography of all spaces, voids between building areas, prior to them actually being sealed up. This approach provided the security service with a range of assurances whilst providing them information in the event they found themselves searching any particular venue. Utilising this methodology, it became possible to further mitigate operational risk while supporting the establishment of certain key options that directly influence risk mitigation and control, supporting measures. And then we'll focus on capacity planning. To host a major event in a busy city, there is a need to understand its capacity, specifically when considering the number and types of people in and out movements during the event timeline. And as cities grow in size and population, they become the epicenter of our ever-accelerating economic life, for which failure is not an option. However, this growth in turn brings with it pressures on critical services, energy, water, communications, and a need to ensure that the local authorities and utilities can respond to operational risks in order to protect and preserve national and international interests. And with the current unpredictability of weather conditions that we're experiencing in the 21st century, the physical, social and economic challenges also need to be taken into account. It's therefore been found that specific measures are necessary for both regionally and locally, internally, externally, to cover a wide range of stresses that can weaken the fabric needed for delivery of a successful major event. With this in mind, one of the outcomes from London 2012 was to identify the level of risk to critical national infrastructure, then to agree ownership and contingency requirements as a response to realistic scenarios, including the level of disruption to business and the population. You can now hopefully understand why any major event has the need for capacity planning assumptions. And with this in mind, I want to share with you some of those that we used for London 2012 Olympics, as you can see on the screen. In the region of 10,500 athletes for the Olympics, 4,200 athletes for the Paralympics. And these athletes are going to be supported by 14,000 coaches and officials. It was expected that some 7,000 sponsors will be attending the Games. There'll be 250,000 accredited people attending, including 77,000 members of the Olympic family. Large numbers of heads of state, royalty and other dignitaries from 280 competing nations be present. And the Games will be followed by some 37,000 of the world's newspaper, radio, television and internet journalists. A few more areas that need to be taken into account. For London 2012, there will be over 11.2 million tickets. You can start seeing this building up now, additional usage of airports. Estimated the number of hotel rooms that we need to have available. The use of transportation modes in London, possibly upwards of 138 additional mainline train journeys. Some 78% of spectators would like to travel from within London and 22% from outside. And on a peak day, 150,000 spectators would travel to the Olympic zone for the morning session, 125,000 of them through central London. And there'll be severe strain on mobile communication, telephone networks, as well as the internet, with limitation of frequencies for private mobile networks. These planned assumptions provided sufficient information to consider impacts on the city's capacity to manage the movement of people, as well as identifying what was beyond normal daily requirements for any event. You should also be aware that businesses, daily commuters and people living in London were faced with the same fears of significant disruption. Before the Olympics, they just need advice on how and best to plan for what we call business as unusual. More to say on this shortly. So what if? So what if your organisation faces and manages challenges? Your organisation faces and manages challenges every day, such as late running, transport, supplier delays, computer crashes, accidents and fraud, each one causing nuisance or other forms of disruption as a minimum. The impact from such an event could prevent you from conducting business, affecting your brand, image or reputation. So what if something similar affects your organisation during a major event? You don't have enough staff. Your technology fails. Transport is disrupted. Your supply chain is affected. Your workplace is restricted. You'll be better prepared to respond to these challenges if you have given these facts some early consideration and have business continuity plans in place. Some organisations already have comprehensive business continuity plans, and where this is the case, you should ensure that these plans are reviewed against the factors that you may experience. And contingency measures are put in place to take account of additional organisational pressures caused by the event. Business continuity plan for any major event, in my experience, should therefore continue to follow existing good practice. And as such, you should consider where the event could impact on your organisational critical activities and how it could disrupt them. Determine a strategy for dealing with this disruption, such that your organisation continues to deliver key services and products. They should consider resources such as people, premises, technology, supplies, and stakeholders. Review existing business continuity plans against changing requirements with your current business continuity strategies and update as appropriate. Deliver testing and exercise for any revised plans. They will be revised, and continue to review and improve them in the run-up to the event. And engage with your employees and supply chain, ensuring any changes to your plans and strategies are fully embedded and understood all levels within the organisation. And remember that the biggest impact from a major event will be felt in and around competition venues, meaning that most organisations operating in and around any metropolis will be affected by the event to some extent. So now we'll look at some of the considerations for business and the organiser. That, in this case for London 2012, was me, because I was going to be impacted as well. I now intend to cover the advice similar to that we provided to organisations during London 2012, all of which I believe is still relevant for major events and worth your consideration. To begin with, you should be aware that an event will have the potential to impact on your business operations in a range of ways. It's therefore important that your preparedness is proportionate to manage identified impacts, whilst at the same time make the most of opportunities afforded by the event. I'm going to cover some of the areas your business may be affected by during the event, along with some tips on how to plan ahead. Staffing. Depending on the proximity to an event venue, it's highly likely your staff journeys may be longer, given the large number of additional passengers expected on the transport network, as well as around other event venues. You may need to discuss with your staff ways in which they can plan their travel to work, or if there are different ways for them to work during the event. In addition, employees may wish to take time off during the event because they're volunteering or taking annual leave. So you need to review things such as annual leave requests, high levels of absence. Employees need to change their normal hours of work due to unprecedented pressure on transport services. Possible loss in productivity during popular or high-profile events. Time off for people who are volunteering for the actual event itself. Where temporary changes to be made to existing human resources policies, you should ensure that employees and other affected individuals have been briefed and trained on this, and they understand their roles and responsibilities. Employees should be encouraged to consider reducing any non-essential travel, especially in peak hours. If travel is essential, they should be encouraged to travel at different times, or in fact by using different modes or routes. There's a whole range of issues about internet and home working. Again, organisations should be encouraged to arrange for employees to work more flexible hours during the event, and this may require them to work from different locations, such as from other offices or home, or at different times than usual. In developing your business continuity plans, you will need to ensure that any increase in home working is supported by appropriate IT, and that internal systems and internet service providers have been engaged in the planning process so that demands on your central IT resources are understood and managed. It is possible that remote working may be slower during the event, or in very severe cases may be dropouts due to increased number of people accessing your internal systems via the internet. For telecommunications at times of peak demand, it is unavoidable that mobile networks may be slowed down by higher volumes of traffic, more so with videos, pictures being transmitted across certainly the mobile networks. Travel disruption. There will be more people using public transport and a road network during any event. This could potentially disrupt your employees' journeys, deliveries, collections, and the operations of suppliers, other contractors and freight. So to keep your business running, you should aim to reduce the need to travel and make essential journeys at less busy times or by using different modes or routes. Freight deliveries here, in certain locations at certain times, there will be disruption on local roads during any event that will affect organisations receiving and supplying goods and services, as well as other movements, such as waste collection. It will also affect organisations that transport freight, may be subject to restrictions on loading and delivery activity. It is expected that access into and out of areas where the event is being held will be difficult, particularly from early morning to late evening, not necessarily just around the event venues themselves. As a result, deliveries, collections, and servicing activity may need to change. This includes any activity from delivery lorries and vans, courier bikes, or even the postal services. Existing local controls on deliveries must be considered. These may include curbside restrictions, planning conditions, even noise abatement, and voluntary restrictions. Energy and water services. The water, sewage and energy companies should have worked hard to assess the requirements for their services and put in place measures to ensure they continue to meet guaranteed supply standards for their customers during the event. All utility companies should be allowed to respond to and repair emergency faults during any event, but non-essential works, such as planned maintenance and new connections, may be limited by security, travel and roadworks restrictions. Those seeking a new energy connection during the period of any event may experience delays and advise contact their local distribution network operator. Safety and security. The principal way in which organisations help to reduce safety and security risk is by focusing on minimising their own vulnerabilities, ensuring you have robust business continuity and resilience arrangements and IT security measures in place. Plan ahead to ensure you have adequate security personnel in place and taking appropriate measures to draw up mitigation and contingency plans, as well as encouraging retention of employees. Where applicable, conducting strict pre-employment screening checks for security reasons. This will reduce security threats by ensuring that those employed meet required standards, possess the right to work. Being aware that organisations employing private security staff will need to provide adequate training in advance of the event, for example, in identifying and dealing with suspected hostile reconnaissance and information gathering activity associated with terrorism. And insurance. During an event, it may be necessary to work in a different way. User working hours may change. The products and services you offer may be amended. Your employees may be working on alternative premises. Stock may be building up at your premises because of delivery difficulties. You should inform your insurers about such changes to ensure that your insurance policies continue to provide you with expected protection. There may also be a need to increase or amend sums insured at locations where your property is kept, or advise of changes to police responses during the event. And a range of other factors that you need to take into account, not least accommodation. During any event, there will be an increased demand for overnight accommodation. The supporting local services, they may change, they may need manage the nature and scale of activity in the locality. And if you have, or around your building, have a lot of branding, there may be enforceable restrictions on any unofficial association with event, such as street trading and advertising, that may apply in areas close to the event venues. So my belief is that we need to use good practice. The logo that you can see, Business and National Government Network Group, was founded by me in 2006 as a trusted group where like-minded individuals can meet and discuss information related to good practice for games and preparedness. It was when BAME members came together to create a supply chain management process, which is referred to by the British Standards Institution in their PAS 7000 supply chain risk management, that helped organisations make choices about whether or not to engage with a potential supply chain partner prior to London 2012. In addition to the above, BAME members also engaged creation of business continuity for dummies and preparing your business for the Games, both made available for the London 2012 Olympic Games. So there are some key points to take into mind here. Consider which aspects of your business activities are critical and how the event may disrupt them. Determine a strategy to deal with disruption so that the business continues to deliver key services and products, take into account resources such as people, premises, technology, suppliers and stakeholders. Review current business continuity plans against any changes to your strategies. Deliver testing and exercise of plans and review these in a run-up to the event. Establish business continuity awareness so that it's important it's understood at all levels within the organisation. And from my point of view, I would only suggest you create a trusted group of like-minded professionals and share related information. Since London 2012, BAME has continued, and as time moves on, it was decided in December 2018 there should be a more formal organisation. And that's the other logo you can see on the screen now, the Resilience Association, which has been formed to bring together initially all the BAME members, but to grow with individuals and not compete with institutes or any other group, but to bring together the practitioners and people who have a real interest and develop the whole continuity and, I guess, work with academia more than anything else. So, in summary, confident but not complacent. I say to everybody who's on this webinar, you need to agree with executive management stakeholders, the risk appetite. I mentioned about games time, but any major event, the risk appetite that you need to plan against. You need to identify the impact on your organisation, short and long term. What if? You need to understand the boundaries, control, outsource operations, especially your supply chain. You need to establish your processes and procedures to manage business as unusual. And deliver a proportionate amount of resilience measures adopting industry good practice, whilst at the same time communicating with your own stakeholders that you are, and I use this because if you ever around you in London 2012 and listen to some of the broadcasts going out, certainly from the government, they always said, we are confident but not complacent. And I think that term is so critical to anyone who is planning for such types of events. Yeah, you can be as confident you like, but events will happen, things you may not have planned for. And that means you've got to not take that complacency view. You need to be fully prepared for anything that's going to come at you. So, thank you. What I can say to everyone who's listening in, hosting Olympic Games requires an effort Herculean proportions for all involved, not only the athletes. The coordination required is supremely complex. but this is no reason to approach a major event with pessimism. Despite the challenges, it will also present opportunities, not least from how the rest of the world sees you. However, if by any chance you're serious about wanting a challenge, as I was, then there is no better job you could be involved with. You just need a lot of commitment, lots and lots of enthusiasm, the ability to be capable of working in a fast-moving and changing environment, and more. So for any global major event, my message to you is to get involved early and embrace the challenges being posed. And whatever happens, enjoy the experience. And I'd like to just add to my thanks. Along my Olympic journey, I must thank those who are working with me at the Olympic Delivery Authority, London 2012, Organised Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, the Business Continuity Institute, London Forum, and Emergency Planning Society, London Branch. And of course, BAME London, my trusted group, which is now formed as a Resilience Association. And finally, thanks to the DRI for asking me to speak today, especially to those of you who are planning to attend the next greatest show on earth in Tokyo next year.
Excellent, Steve. Thank you. Now we'll hear from Andy.
Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to my presentation on gold for Olympic and Paralympic Games, business continuity lessons learned during London 2012. My name's Andy Tompkinson, and my role was a consultant, a contractor, if you like, for the delivery of the amazing London 2012 Olympics, right from the onset, which was way back in 2009, through to the closing down and the cliff edge, as was at the end of games, when we decommissioned the temporary venues and stood up what was intended to be the legacy for 100 years in my hometown, in Stratford, in London, in England, in Great Britain. So I'm going to tell you that story over the next few minutes, and hopefully give you some insight and some lessons learned and some case studies around what you may come up against when you're looking at major venues, major sporting events, major world events that are affecting you locally, nationally, and internationally. I'd like to have a few minutes on some of the case studies around the Olympics. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, we had the 7/7, the terror attack where 52 people were killed in London by a coordination of 5 terrorist events, 4 on the tube and 1 on a bus. These were suicide bombers, and I was actually travelling into London that day, and when I arrived on my intercity train from up, I live in Lancashire, in the north of the country, I got to Euston Station, which is a major railroad terminus in London, and trying to get onto the London Underground, the tube, was impossible as people were coming out, and the announcements were that there had been a power surge. So as a good contingency planner, like I am, I nipped along to the next underground station, which was within walking distance. And as I came out the station, I could hear the sirens, and I realised actually that a power failure was somewhat of a misnomer, and there may be something more to it than a power failure. And as I got along to Great Portland Street, which is the next tube station along, the bus bomb went off, and so everybody responded to that, and the emergency services responded to that in the traditional blue lights fashion. And that's when I realised that I had to do something different to the rest of my day, which was mainly actually to go visit my clients. And one of the interesting things from my business continuity consultancy work was that all the clients had already responded, and in fact, in the case of the British Red Cross, which was based in Moorfields, quite near to where one of the tube bombings occurred, they didn't need me at all, because actually when they convened their crisis management team, the first thing they said was, what would Andy do if he were here? And immediately responded by, okay, we appoint a leader, we appoint a scribe, we're starting the log, let's get out the battle box, let's get out the plans, let's start working through the agenda and the checklist of what to do, and immediately got a grip of what was going on at that early stage in the morning, which was, by the time I got there, it was very clear that they got the situation under control. Indeed, in Selfridges, there was some discussion about whether Oxford Street, being one of the major shopping centres in London, would be targeted, and whether they should open or whether they should stay shut. So I was involved with some decision making there, and the decision was to increase security, but to stay open and to be vigilant, and Selfridges continue to operate for the rest of the day, although crowd levels of shoppers started thinning out quite early, because people did want to leave London, and the available transport system, interestingly enough, did the correct drills, rather than, and this happens in business continuity quite often, people decide that they'll do something real quick in an ad hoc way to do their best with the best intention. So you could say, right, anybody that can drive a bus, let's just get some buses and let's just pick up some passengers and let's just take them home. Of course, the danger for doing something ad hoc in a business continuity sense is, by tomorrow morning you'll have buses stuck under bridges, you'll have buses that have run out of fuel, you'll have buses with no drivers in the wrong place, and it'd be almost impossible to recover and restore a normal service. So the right decision was taken by Transport for London, which was to suspend certain services, to be able to regroup, to be able to plan for the next day, to allow London to essentially walk home, and then restore, recover in good order a better service in the morning. And that was, I think, a good lesson for any business continuity practitioner, is not to do anything that's knee-jerk and ad hoc, even though it's well-intentioned, because in some cases you can do more harm than good. I'd like to talk to you about the assurance part of this, and I'm sure Steve mentioned this already, but one of the things as business continuity practitioners we do badly is we badly procure and we badly manage our third parties, and we badly manage our contracts. And the shining example of a good way of doing this was on London 2012 Olympics, where because it was public money, because we were under so much press scrutiny, every single time we specified a measure or a control in a contract with a supplier, we made absolutely sure, Ian Morris and Trevor Easley were two of the guys that made absolutely sure that the assurance on that third party was done correctly. And so it was interesting to take glass that was going to be used for one of the venues. It had to be ballistically protected because of the nature of the security threat around explosions, and we took it down to a range in Shoebury-Ness, which is down on the Thames estuary. We fired some bullets at it, and we fired some. We used some explosives by it to assure it. And it didn't work, it wasn't up to specification, and we immediately went back to the supplier and the contractors and the subcontractors, and because it was written in the contract, we could say, you need to replace this with the specific, with the specified ballistic glass. You need to do it at your own cost, you need to still do it within the timescale, because we can't make any, there's no extension to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. It's an absolute it's a cast iron, set in stone, maximum tolerable period of disruption, if you like. It's a time where something has absolutely got to happen. and so the contracts facilitated the assurance on the venues to make sure that the materials that were being used, the way that the materials were, the workmen, the way that the materials were delivered, designed, delivered, and implemented, were so that if there was anything that was substandard, it was going to be fixed. And the reason why it was going to be fixed is the assurance was so strong. And I would commend the assurance piece to any business continuity planner to look into their supply chain, their suppliers, the suppliers, the fourth parties, to make sure that your contracts are watertight and that you can deliver what was originated from London 2012, which was resilient by design. We had in the UK secure by design, designing security into venues and infrastructure, but resilience by design was a new concept and used extensely ever since. I'm sure everybody should do a quick web-based search on resilience by design and look up the things, the elements of resilient by design, to build in resilience into the construction, into the building that you're about to design, so that it saves all the money of retrofitting, the redundancy, the extra services, the contingency into a building once it's been built. Lastly, supply chain continuity, looking at subcontractors, looking at the resilience, if you like, of the supply chain itself, to make sure that contractors and their subcontractors and their subcontractors, the third and fourth and fifth parties, could actually deliver, so that there were no single points of failure in the supply chain, that there were reserves and alternatives in terms of consumables, and the specification of materials was 100% correct and assured throughout the supply chain. This is again something that business continuity practitioners, we don't do that well as an industry, because we don't go down the supply chain route, and we really ought to do that, because supply chain failure is a massive risk to any business continuity, whether you're public or private sector. And in the UK, from a financial services regulatory point of view, and an output really from London 2012, was looking very closely at MSPs, managed service providers, OSPs, outsourced service providers, to the financial services industry, and making sure that there are no systemic risks that could cause customer harm, and this is very much a regulated area now, and some of the output from that was from lessons learned from London 2012. I would commend to every business continuity practitioner, get yourself a battle box, get yourself a grab bag, get yourself a container, something that you can move around, which contains the basic things that you might need if you have to evacuate or evacuate. A list of a torch, a first aid kit, a set of the plans and procedures, items that you might need should you need to evacuate or evacuate. And we had battle boxes at every venue, and in the common domain. The common domain on the Olympic Park meant the parkland area, the area that was accessible to everybody, that in between going to see a sport, they could sit down and eat the sandwiches in the sunshine, in the parklands around the Olympic Park. That's what common domain means. So we had battle boxes set up in the common domain, as well as roving patrols, as I mentioned earlier with the games makers. These volunteers actually carried the battle boxes and were able to respond to any small event. Somebody fell over, a child hurt themselves, somebody saw something that was suspicious. So we had that games maker layer of response, as well as the security response, as well as the law enforcement response. So we had layers of response, and the most effective lowest level was the games maker with the battle box in the venues. Organisation resilience was about, we talk about the POC, which was the Park Operations Centre. I would recommend any business continuity manager set up or at least earmark an area that can be used as an operations centre where people, the incident management team, a crisis management team can convene and operate from, which gives them an area where they can dial in or tune into situation awareness. There's a TV or an internet connection or a radio at least, so that they can listen to what the situation is in terms of being aware of what the press are saying and what the emergency services are saying, and be able to operate out of somewhere that's safe and secure, that gives you some sense of situation awareness, and as a command, control and communication centre. If you don't have one of those, I recommend that you do have one of those, and all of the venues had one. We had a Park Operations Centre, and there were many OCs, operational centres, throughout the whole of the organisation of LOCOG and the Olympic Delivery Authority. Just a word about security. Security sometimes it sounds like a subset for business continuity, and one of the things that we tried to do on the Olympic Park, which I recommend to everybody, is to integrate security and contingency planning, so that there's not security and business continuity. There is just one thing, and everybody is aware of what their roles and responsibilities are to deal with any event, whether it be a security event, whether it be a computer virus, an information security event, or whether it be a supply chain failure, whether it be a reputational issue. All of those things are part of business continuity, should be integrated. In the common domain, even down to the drains for the wastewater and sewage, we had a RACI. I would commend this to any business continuity practitioner. RACI: responsible, accountable, consulted and informed. So this is really the RACI is to be able to make sure that there is an accountable person, a signature, a group of people that are responsible for every single part of the operation. And that was really key for when things go wrong. Then immediately it's very easy to be able to identify who the person responsible is, what the accountability is in terms of who pays for which service to get something fixed, to consult with other people who may be affected by the outage, and the I is the information to make sure that the communications is sent out so people can be informed of whatever changes there may be to normal while the problem is being fixed. Just a word about permanent and temporary venues. So I showed you earlier on the picture that there were 5 permanent venues, but literally hundreds of temporary venues, sometimes known as the overlay for the games. This is something that is important from a business continuity perspective, because in business continuity we tend to look at a fixed point in time. The business impact analysis is a snapshot of a fixed point in time. What I would say is from an Olympic Games perspective, there must be flex, because there is always change, and the temporary venues came and went, and therefore business continuity plans had to be ramped up and closed down. So it's about being burstable, if you like. It's about being able to ramp up, be able to react quickly and effectively to changes, so that business impact analysis that's done once a year that everybody hangs a hat on. I'm saying that's a good thing, but I'm saying that that's not the whole story, because there is flexibility and fluidity in business, and we need to be able to be burstable, to be able to ramp up, to react as things change, as our business changes, and in particular as venues change from Olympic Park perspective. suspicious bags. We had something in the region, I think, of 14,000 bags that were left on the park. Either people had left their sandwich bag behind because they couldn't be bothered to take it home. People were leaving bags with rubbish in behind. People had simply forgotten their bag because they were distracted by their children, or because they were late for an event, or because they needed to get somewhere real quick. And so suspicious bags were a massive problem. Suspicious bags is probably the wrong term to use, because everybody had been through on the Olympic Park a security search and screening process. We had very much confidence that nothing in anybody's bags was going to cause us any harm. So from a suspicious bags point of view, we didn't say, oh, that's suspicious, so it's likely to be a bomb. We said, actually, that's a bag. It's very likely that it's got people's possessions or rubbish in it. And so we need to take a close look at that. And we used an acronym called HOT, which is very useful, used by law enforcement agencies, just to take a quick look at those bags. So the games makers, the contract security services, and law enforcement, police and military, looked at bags in the HOT sense. HOT meaning, is that bag hidden? The H is hidden. Has it been hidden away? Which would make it more suspicious than if it was just left in a place where you might actually leave a bag, at a counter, at a fast food store, in a shop, in a corner by a bench. So there's a difference between it being hidden and not. If it was hidden, it would be more suspicious than if it wasn't. The O is for obvious. Is it obviously some kind of device? Has it got batteries and wires? Is it ticking like a clock? Does it smell of almonds? Has it got some kind of obviousness that it's a bomb? If it is, then you need to treat it as suspicious. And if it doesn't, if it's not obviously a bomb, then it's much more likely to be a bag that's been left by mistake. And lastly, is the type of bag that it is. So if you were expecting to see a sports bag in a sports venue, if you were expecting to see a rucksack in a bus station or a station or an area of transport where somebody would likely have that type of bag, then it would be much less suspicious. So we used HOT as a way of being able to train people to identify should they raise the alarm as a suspicious bag, or should they deal with it like the other 14,000 bags as not suspicious. It's just bags that people had left behind. And that was an important consideration, because the disruption caused by somebody saying something suspicious and then having to respond to that as if it were a bomb with a cordon is a massive disruption in itself. And out of the 14,000 bags that we dealt with, we didn't have any that fell under the HOT suspicious category, and so we didn't have to respond in that way. That's about good training, and it's also about confidence in the searching and screening, as I said, from security. Because I was a dancer in the closing ceremony, I wanted to work at nights, so we had a real problem that we couldn't do any of the replenishment or fixing anything that was broken during the day, during games time. We really were constrained to have about 4 hours every night where we had to fix stuff, and so that was really my job during games time, was to be able to identify what was broken, the right contractor, as I said, down the supply chain, to be able to deploy those resources to be able to fix that problem, whether it was a security device like a CCTV camera, or a gate with a magnetic lock, or a swipe card, or the park fiber network, or a waterways barrier. These were the areas that I was responsible for the break fix at night time. And it was the important thing from a business continuity perspective was to be able to prioritize and make sure that the areas that could cause the most disruption the next day were dealt with first. And we had something like a backlog of 180 problems, which we had to deal with only 4 hours and finite resources of contractors to be able to fix those, which was quite a juggling act in order to get everything back up and running and safe and secure, ready for the next morning. And that included the Park Fibre network and Honeywell, the contractors that provided the wherewithal to manage that service desk. Probably they won't have me on their Christmas card list anymore, but we'll leave that where it is. I did mention the waterway barriers. We had both canals and rivers flowing through the park. One of the key areas of security was to prevent a terrorist frogman underwater gaining access into the park. So we had floating waterway barriers with a 17-foot fence with an electrified topper on the surface, and with a handle to be able to deploy down into the water, right down to the riverbed, an anti-frogman fence, if you like, which was deployed into the water, and it was monitored with an intrusion detection system, so that if anybody tried to cut through the underwater barrier, then it would have alarmed, and so we would have been aware that someone was trying to cut through it. Of course, it was a major undertaking to open and close the waterway barriers to allow legitimate traffic up and down the river, which was a problem. And my main problem was the guards' training, in that they would want to open the barrier without realising that the underwater fence had been deployed, which would then scrape along the bottom of the barrier, scrape along the bottom of the waterway, which would then cause a massive amount of problem, because it would jam, and then you wouldn't be able to open or close the waterway barrier. It was a problem, and that was a training issue. So I would say, from a business continuity perspective, that some of the controls, some of the unusual controls that you might need to use for a major event, they are subject to really good training, that the lowest, if you like, organizational level, which would be a security guard or a cleaner, is very important that they're included in training, so that they are absolutely aware of what they need to do to safely operate security and contingency. So I hope that's been useful from you to me. I'm sure that you can drop me a line if you want to, and I'll answer any questions that you've got. And I really appreciate the DRI giving me the opportunity to present, share some of my experiences and some of my stories with you today. So thank you all very much.
Thanks so much to both of you for sharing these lessons with us today. I think we've all learned a lot. And thanks to all of you out there who have joined us today. A recording of this and all our other webinars is posted on the DRI website. This webinar has been a production of DRI International 2019. All rights reserved. Thank you for your attention.